All right, we have another week behind us and one fewer week ahead of us. I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing from people. And one thing that I really appreciate is how responsive folks are being to the things that I say. After somebody turns in stuff, I'll say stuff, I'll give some feedback. And for most people, within a day or two, they turn around and resubmit stuff. When I say that, I also want people to know that I did go through and the things that have not been turned in for the most part, I put zeros on. And again, that's not because you've lost the opportunity to increase your grade. All that means is that hopefully uh, Canvas sends you something to let you know what the grade is so that you can double check and make sure that you turn the things in that you need to. Right now, by the end of this week, everybody should have their foam things carved and paper mached and their tiles done. And we'll talk about some of that stuff. And then I also want to talk about the conceptual stuff that's going on, as well as um, the critiques. And I mentioned that last week that I would do an example of a critique so that everybody would know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, Emily, do you have any questions of material that we've covered so far?
Um, I was wondering, I'm not done with my tiles yet. In the color one, is it okay if it's collaged from magazines instead of printed out paper?
It can be. I think that as long as it's collage from anything that has colors that are not primarily textural, then it's fine. So I last week I mentioned magazines and paint color chips.
Hmm.
Design magazines are good sometimes, but so are like the crappy ones you find at Desert Industries or Dollar Tree.
Hmm.
There's been some really interesting ones where people went through. One person made a collage face with butterfly wings that was cut out from magazines.
Yeah, I saw
So
that.
yeah, so I think anything that is not meant to be primarily textural would probably work as long as it fits in with the color scheme that you are working in.
Yeah. And then how long should the paper mache um take? Like between carvings, I guess. Like you shave it down, you paper mache it, and then shave it down, and then do it again. How long should each one do you think take?
Well, hopefully you'll only need to do 2 layers, and the
Hmm.
first layer after it dries, and that's usually overnight, um, especially in Utah. And I would just sand it down instead of carving it again.
Oh yeah.
Um, Sand it down and then do your second layer. And most of those are turning out pretty good. The only concern that I have is sometimes people will leave loose ends of paper sticking up or glue bumps. And most of the time, when I mention that, they'll go back, sand them down, and everything's fine. And as
Mhm.
long as you don't have the foam showing through after you sand it down, you don't need to do a third coating, I think.
Okay.
So one coat, let it dry overnight, sand it down the next day, see if and then put a second coat on, then let it dry overnight, and the next day sand it down.
Okay. Sounds good. That's all.
All right. Well, one thing I do want to do is go through and look at some of the carvings that people have sent in and talk about good elements. I think we did that a little bit last week. Didn't we? We looked at a couple last week.
Yeah, last week there were I think two or three.
Okay. Then we'll look at some of the others that have been turned in. All right. Okay. I'll tell you right off the bat, I really like when somebody does something like this. I enjoy it because one of the things we talked about last week was kind of getting a notion for the organic inspirations behind whatever the person's doing and making sure that it is abstract. And I think this person has done a really good job of that. It almost feels to me like these are like from succulents or cactuses or something without any of the needles on. But it almost feels there's a certain